There's an old saying, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And for Gregg Popovich, that works perfectly for him because he is the luckiest coach of all time. At age 74, Gregg Popovich just signed the biggest contract by a coach in NBA history, a 5-year, $80 million contract. And when speaking about Gregg Popovich, there's hardly anything you can say that's bad. The guy's one of the best to ever do it, and people who have interacted with him on a personal level have all called him one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. But he's also one of the luckiest guys. I'm not saying Pop didn't work hard to get to the position he is, because he did. But there's been also some other factors that have led him to be able to show his greatness. First, the way Pop got to the NBA. Popovich was a D3 coach for Pomona College, and he was also an unpaid assistant for Larry Brown at Kansas in 1987. Then 1988, when the Spurs hired Larry Brown to be the next head coach, Pop asked Brown to join his NBA staff, and Brown actually hired Popovich. Once Brown was fired, the Spurs organization asked Pop to stay and be an assistant coach for the team. Then Popovich would actually take another assistant coaching job for the Warriors, until 2 years later, when the Spurs would actually offer him a general manager job in 1994. At the start of the 1996 season, the Spurs were looked at as a championship contender, but key players got injured, causing him to start the season 3-15. This would lead Popovich firing head coach Bob Hill in a 15-second meeting and naming himself as the head coach. Imagine going from a D3 school, being unpaid, finding your way as an assistant elsewhere, kind of working your way back, becoming the GM, and firing the coach, and then becoming the head coach. I'm not saying it's necessarily luck, but someone was definitely looking out for him there because that was a wild ride, if you ask me. And also adding to his luck, Pop was very lucky to coach great players. When Popovich became the head coach of the Spurs, David Robinson was one of the best players in the league in the 90s. He averaged 24, 11, and 3 blocks. He was a multiple All-NBA player and won Defensive Player of the Year in 95. But then he gets hurt in the 96 season. So, the Spurs were bad enough that they earned the first overall pick, which became Tim Duncan. And if you remember, Tim Duncan was pretty good at basketball. Tim was a can't-miss first pick, averaging 17 points a game and 12 rebounds at Wake Forest. So not only does Pop have 2 #1 overall picks on his team at the same time and a future top 75 player, these two guys had some of the best attitudes you could ever ask for in a superstar. It's almost more rare how team-friendly these guys were than them being good at basketball, because most superstars are not like Tim Duncan and David Robinson, just flat out. They're very selfish, they want to do their own thing. It almost feels like Tim Duncan was so boring in his ways because he was a team-friendly guy. You gotta love it. And these two guys were not only really good at basketball, they were willing to be coached and do whatever it takes for the team to win. Both players were not flashy, but they were great locker room guys. They led him to his first championship. And Pop would also continue to draft other Hall of Famers in Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. To Pop's credit, he did have the foresight to look for talent overseas to find the diamond in the rough, but also those players had to pan out and have the talent needed to be great. To Pop's credit, he took a shot on these guys. Most GMs weren't going overseas drafting these players, and because they were usually terrible, they ended up being busts. But he went over there, got guys like Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, and just absolutely knocked them out of the park. You gotta respect that. Then these additions would allow the Spurs to dominate the 2000s, winning 3 NBA championships. And when those players started to get older and lose a step, the Indiana Pacers traded away Kawhi Leonard's draft night rights to the Spurs for their backup point guard, George Hill. Again, you gotta credit Pop for making the trade. I mean, come on. We thought Kawhi Leonard was gonna be that guy. I mean, again, you gotta credit Pop, but still pretty lucky. Other teams did not believe in Kawhi, causing him to drop to the 15th overall pick. Then this addition helped the Spurs win another championship as Kawhi was named the Finals MVP in the 2014 NBA Finals. And then, once Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker all retired, it looked like Kawhi Leonard was gonna be the guy for the franchise, but ultimately, he wanted out. Since then, the Spurs have been mediocre to bad, and there were rumors that Pop was actually going to retire soon, until a 7'5" French-born player who has handles like a guard, but also could protect the rim like an elite big, was going to be available in the 2023 draft. His name is Victor Wembanyama. And it was obvious to the Spurs and other teams, this guy was going to be good, so they went and and tanked for him. Some people said this is the greatest prospect in the history of the sport, and if LeBron James was drafted in the same exact draft without any achievements, he would go number 2 and Victor would go number 1. That's how highly touted this guy is. And we all know, tanking doesn't always lead to teams receiving the first overall pick. Ask every team in the NBA that is tanked. But lucky for Pop, after 26 years for him drafting Tim Duncan number 1 overall, they received the number 1 overall pick again. So you're telling me he's going to have 3 guys that you would arguably say were 3 of the best big men in the past 30 years. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and Victor Wembanyama. I mean, those are all generational type players. While the Spurs dynasty may be getting revamped with the addition of the number 1 overall pick of Victor Wembanyama, the Warriors dynasty may be coming to an end and they have one man to blame. Check out my previous video and I'll let you know why.